The public imagination is fixated on launch silos and hypersonic glide vehicles. This is a deliberate misdirection. The primary vector for a systemic breakdown is not a kinetic strike, but engineered silence. Total war is no longer measured in megatons, but in terabytes per second. The prohibitive kinetic cost of a nuclear exchange makes it a non-starter. The economic cost of severing the global financial nervous system, the thousands of miles of undersea fiber optic cables, is an asymmetric bargain. This attack surface extends from the seabed to low Earth orbit. While the media runs distraction drills, reports now confirm adversarial actors are equipping attack drones with Starlink-type terminals. This is not imitation. It is operational reconnaissance of the West's primary command and control architecture. The objective is mastery of the network before its degradation. The strategic objective is not to defeat the United States conventionally, but to render it deaf and blind. To create a blind Leviathan, a global power stripped of its satellite reconnaissance and financial data streams, operating on a fatal intelligence delay. In this state of systemic sensory deprivation, protocols designed to prevent accidental war, like launch on warning, become the mathematical accelerant for it. A hegemon that cannot see becomes a zero-sum liability to global solvency. The Ukraine war is not a geopolitical chess match. It is a solvency crisis. The public is told this is a liability for Russia, a drain on its economy, an unpopular domestic mandate. CSS analysis echoes this, framing the kinetic campaign as a primary drain on the Russian Federation's stability. This is a deliberate misdirection. The true balance sheet in crisis is the Western model of power projection. The U.S. proxy war blueprint, funding and equipping a foreign military to absorb the kinetic cost, is now insolvent. An internal assessment from the Center for European Policy Analysis, CEEPA, documents explicit failures in the U.S. and EU support models. This isn't a temporary setback. It is the mathematical proof of diminishing returns. Each billion spent yields less strategic leverage, exposing the model's fundamental unviability against a peer-level industrial base. This is not a strategic choice. It is a forced pivot. When the primary tools of conventional and financial hegemony begin to fail, when proxy wars become resource black holes, strategic bases become contested liabilities, and the central bank's independence is compromised, the system has no choice but to change the vector of conflict. Weakness, not strength, is the accelerant for escalation. An empire that can no longer afford to win conventionally must rewrite the rules of engagement. The motive is survival. The objective is to shift the conflict from a domain of attrition, where it is losing, to a domain of absolute leverage, where it believes its dominance is irrefutable. This is the logic of a launch-on-warning posture applied not to missiles, but to the entire system of global power. The systemic failure of the Western military-industrial model is not a debate. It is a mathematical certainty. According to analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the kinetic cost to neutralize a $5 million main battle tank is now as low as $500. This is the money shot. A 1 to 10,000 cost asymmetry. Every successful strike is not just an asset liquidation. It is a systemic financial attack that bankrupts conventional force structure on the battlefield's balance sheet. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed. State-level military dominance, predicated on prohibitively expensive platforms, is now facing a kinetic solvency crisis. When the primary tools of conventional leverage become an economic liability, the entire system must find a new backstop. This is the vector. The blueprint forces an escalation away from kinetic assets you can no longer afford toward the only leverage that remains. The map you are shown is a lie. The borders are irrelevant. The real geography of conflict is not defined by nations, but by gray zones, regions designated as systemic laboratories. Recent travel warnings for nations like South Africa are not humanitarian notices. They are markers for active staging grounds. The primary blueprint for projecting U.S. power, the proxy war model, is now a liability. A Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA, report confirms its operational and financial failures in the Ukrainian theater. The model promised low-cost, high-leverage kinetic dominance. It delivered a solvency crisis. This failure is not just logistical, it is technological. According to Ukrainian specialists, Russian one-way attack drones are now being recovered with integrated Starlink-type satellite terminals. The adversary has absorbed and repurposed the hegemon's core technology, nullifying a key battlefield advantage. The kinetic cost of engagement is approaching mathematical parity. Simultaneously, the physical architecture of American power is being contested. As reported by Australian Broadcasting Corporation, even top-secret strategic assets like the U.S. military base in Greenland are now mired in political and sovereign risk. These are not isolated incidents, they are data points indicating a systemic erosion of forward-deployed leverage. With the primary proxy model failing and hard bases becoming liabilities, the system requires new laboratories. This is the function of the gray zone. Regional instability is cultivated, not suppressed. It becomes a testing environment for next-generation economic and hybrid warfare protocols, far from the cameras focused on Ukraine. This is the critical vector. When conventional and financial leverage become insolvent, as evidenced by the failing Ukraine model and a compromised Federal Reserve cited by the Financial Times, the hegemon does not retreat. It re-engineers the conflict space. The gray zones are where new, lower-cost, higher-impact asymmetric protocols are stress-tested against live civilian and economic infrastructure. The next 12 months will see a sharp increase in unexplained critical infrastructure failures within these gray zone nations. The objective is not chaos, but data. Each event is a calculated experiment to measure the kinetic, political, and financial cost of escalation, calibrating the launch-on warning protocols for a world where conventional dominance is no longer a mathematical certainty. The nuclear command protocol is not designed for ambiguity. It is a mathematical function. When the input is incoming ICBM, the output is counter-launch. There is no variable for unconfirmed data. This is the systemic vulnerability. The doctrine is designated launch-on warning. It is a temporal necessity. The flight time of a peer-state ICBM is under 30 minutes, mandating a decision in less than 10. The entire architecture rests on the absolute integrity of data from early warning radar, such as the strategic assets in Greenland now facing public and geopolitical contestation. This dependency is the primary vector for asymmetric attack. An adversary does not need to defeat a carrier group if they can blind the network. This is the fog of digital war. It is not theoretical. According to Ukrainian specialists, Russian attack drones have been recovered equipped with Starlink-type satellite terminals, a blueprint for weaponizing commercial networks to execute remote electronic warfare. When that cyber attack blinds the radar, the commander is not left with a choice. He is left with a protocol. Is the data loss a malfunction, or is it the electronic shadow of an incoming first strike? The doctrine of mutually assured destruction is solvent only with perfect information. When the data becomes insolvent, the system defaults to its most kinetic function. The commander is forced to launch, not on positive confirmation, but on the terrifying absence of it. The failure of the proxy war model, documented by CEPA analysts, is not an isolated event. It is the first metric in a systemic solvency crisis. The political fragility of strategic outposts, like the U.S. base in Greenland, is the second. The politicization of the Federal Reserve, as noted by the Financial Times, is the third. When conventional military and financial leverage become liabilities, the protocol shifts from force projection to calculated ambiguity. The objective is no longer to win a conventional conflict, but to recalibrate the perception of risk for adversaries. This requires a demonstration of capability that is both devastating in effect and impossible to attribute. The blueprint for this action has already been field-tested. CSIS reports confirm adversaries have successfully integrated commercial, Starlink-type satellite terminals onto one-way attack drones, creating a weapon with global reach and zero identifiable state signature. Therefore, the calibration forecast for the next 12 months is not a cyber attack. It is a physical, logistics decapitation event. A coordinated swarm of commercially deniable drones will execute a synchronized strike against the power substations and fiber optic network hubs of a single, Tier 1 U.S. container port, such as Long Beach or Miami. The kinetic cost will be low. The economic cost, a multi-week paralysis of a core supply chain artery, will be incalculable. Attribution will be debated endlessly. The message, however, will be irrefutable.